All right, I am here today with my guy, Claudio Pereira. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you nailed it. Well done.
Okay, great. And we want to talk about data because one of the things that Claudio and I have been seeing a lot over the last few weeks and even months is a common use case. Somebody is new to an organization, they come in, they look into the CRM, they look into HubSpot, and they go, oh my gosh, this data is a mess. What are we doing? And then they find an organization like ours and go, how do we get out of this mess? And that's when we have to figure out how do we help them live in a better world. So when we get this use case, Claudia, what's the first thing that we should be looking at or that a company should be looking at when they inherit messy data?
I think the starting point is often just to try and understand what that data model looks like, right? Like, what are the objects that are causing some of that mess? Are you bringing in a lot of duplicates? Are your deals a little bit of a mess? Do you have a bunch of integrations that aren't functioning correctly? So I think understanding sort of the lay of the land and how everything is mapped together is sort of the best starting point, because from there we can start to unpack and unpick what's going wrong and work our way towards a solution.
And I think so many times when you inherit the mess, you don't actually know, right? You're like, oh, who are all these contacts? What is their relationship to the company? What's important, what's not. I know one of the things we commonly do when we when we first start is just looking at the contacts and just doing a quick purge. What contact actually matters, what no longer is relevant, what what emails actually still exist, because a lot of times a lot of things have changed. And I just think we're seeing that. And I think for a long time people wanted to build their database, right? A lot of times in that, let's call it the heyday of email marketing, before everything went to a promotions folder, everyone just wanted, it was like spray and pray, right?
Yeah.
And doing everything they could to get reach as many people as possible. And now I think it's much more about like really trying to get efficient with who's even in there. So I feel like it starts with like the people in the contact record first. But also a lot of times there's a contact that's at a company that is certainly a prospect or somebody that your organization wants to work with, and those people are no longer there. So when we run into this and we go through and we look and we see how everything needs to be mapped, how do we customize that to the customer? Because that is ultimately what we want. We want to give them the best data for them, not just go through a checklist. So how do we really work with them to understand what they need so that they can at least live in a better world tomorrow than they're living in today?
Exactly. And I think that's always the objective. I mean, the first thing to say is that there isn't and shouldn't be a one size fits all approach. Every company's data model is a little bit different and they've got different objectives tied towards it. I would say that what we would typically look to do is try and ensure that every object within their portal has a very clear purpose. So some companies will obviously prioritize the company relationships and data within their tools, and others might focus more on sort of the contacts and be more consumer focused. But understanding what those objects might be and defining the relationships between them, because like you said, there may be a number of contacts created in the system, but they're not associating, rolling up to a company correctly. And then whoever's responsible for that relationship with the company inherits a little bit of a mess, doesn't know where to start, and inevitably, communication becomes a little bit muddled. So understanding what those relationships are, mapping them out properly and clearly, and understanding what the rest of their where the rest of their tech stack actually fits into that relationship. So which integrations are supporting sort of their company data, enriching records, automating records, all of those kind of things. Mapping that out up front generally saves a whole bunch of time and headaches and even money further down the line.
Yeah. I feel like when we're working through this, one of the phrases we're always having to kind of navigate is like, okay, how do we know how to build the new world, right? We can build the new world and do things great. But how do we transition the old world into the new world without disrupting everything? And that to me is often the challenge, right? Because we can architect a much better future, but when you have all of this past data, you want to be able to bring it into the new world. You want it to still be accurate, but yeah, how do you balance that?
I think it's fair to say that we often describe them as growing pains, growing towards the company's growth targets, because I think that inevitably, if we inherit a system where there is a little bit of a mess in place, it's obvious that some changes are needed, maybe in terms of internal process or some of the tech stack that might be causing some of that mess. So some changes are needed, and inevitably that creates a little bit of anxiety amongst teams. But what we try and do is actually just go back to that documentation. So if everything's documented upfront clearly and understanding how those relationships work, then we can always lean back against it when we're sort of getting rid of either data or tools that maybe aren't necessarily required. And then it's a case of sort of ensuring that the team is seeing the results as we go. So if we're going to get rid of a whole bunch of data, maybe there's a whole bunch of contact records that were irrelevant and incorrect, etc. If we're getting rid of that, ensuring that we can showcase, hey guys, look at the reports that are working and functioning, answering the questions that you guys are looking for, and automations are running efficiently and effectively and saving you a bit of time during the day. So I think that balance is struck by, number one, having that documentation, sort of the source of truth that we can refer to, and then number two, highlighting those quick wins along the way, so that the teams that we're working with can see the results in real time, and we're not continuously painting a picture of a far-reaching dream that will require weeks and weeks and weeks to reach.
Yeah, I know, because it can definitely get out of hand, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes architecting better is better than architecting perfect. But I think to
Yeah.
your point, if the architecture is purposeful, if you know why you're doing these things and you document it so that everyone can follow, then you can navigate some of these complexities when you inherit a bad data set. What are some best practices when building a data model?
I think the the first thing to consider always is actually just focusing on your buyer's journey, because ultimately, whatever automations and reports and tools that we play around with on the back end, it needs to be in support of making that journey as efficient as possible. So I think understanding your customers first is the key step, and understanding all of their touch points and engagements with your brand or business along that way means that we can tailor the model that we document and how those different objects relate to each other in a way that supports the sales process, because ultimately I think that is always a priority for 99% of the businesses that we engage with. So from a best practice point of view, consider the buyer's journey, ensure that that's sort of the lens that you're viewing everything that comes next from. And then secondly, like I said, I think having that clear relationship defined between objects, whether it's the standard one, contacts companies, or whether you're using custom objects, because there may be some complexities within your field of work. Ensuring that those relationships are clearly defined means that everything that we do next is built on a really solid foundation, and generally sets us up for better results at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's what happens when you put the customer first, right?
Always. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Claudio, this was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to all of you who've inherited one of those messy data sets, one, good luck. But two, if you need a little help, be sure to give us a call, because we see it a lot. That's it for today. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up and make sure you hit subscribe so you can see our latest videos as soon as they drop. We really appreciate you watching. See you next time.